Okay, hello, my beautiful people. Welcome to the next in the series of where astrology and tarot meet. It's me, Raphael from Radiant Reality, with the amazing Heather, Heather from YouTube of Astrology with Heather. So first things first, I have had an absolute blast filming these. I'm learning so much about astrology, and it's actually deepening my understanding of how these two systems tie together, which is really great. So if you haven't seen Heather's channel, please go over to it. She does a bunch of astrological content, which is brilliant and actually full of really good stuff that you can use on a really day-to-day level. She's also got an amazing course out as well, which you can head over to. I'm going to put a link in the description box below. You can go and check her out. Heather, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for that introduction.
All right, so today we are here to talk about the Lovers. So this card, obviously when people see this, especially if they come for readings of a relationship nature, everybody loves to see this card for the obvious reasons. But interestingly enough, its astrological association, or certainly in the way that I read anyway, is Gemini. So in the Lovers, and one of the reasons for that is in the Lovers, this is where you start to see choice. We met the Hierophant, and in the Hierophant, we saw kind of where we didn't have a choice, right? Where we were kind of met with what was appropriate and what was kind of put in front of us and what was kind of almost in a way imposed on us. So the Lovers introduces us to, you know, if you were to follow the Fool's journey, when he gets to the Lovers, this is where he looks for difference. This is where he looks to choose between this and that, and also looks to find an alternative to what was kind of imposed there in the Hierophant card. So this card is quick, it's fun, it's light-hearted, it's all about communication when it comes to relationships, it's all about communication when it comes to partnerships and collaborations, and it very often sees people making decisions or choices between this and that, or them and another person. So if I were talking about all of those things, what would you get from it astrologically?
Well, I mean, that's definitely a Gemini energy. Like Gemini likes to have, that's one of the key words. Like Gemini likes to have options. They like to have lots of options. Wherever Gemini is in your chart, you want to have choice. You want to have options. You want to have the ability to pick and choose. And also, you know, there's that curious energy, right? It's like, you know, what can I do with this? Where can I go with this? What other information is available? So definitely that makes a lot of sense with Gemini.
So as well with the choice thing, so in one of the older decks, I think it was the Tarot de Marseille, the original picture for this was actually it was a young guy who was choosing. On one hand he had his mother, and on the other hand, or his mother, or like an older lady, let's say, and on the other hand he had kind of what would represent his wife or his girlfriend to be. So it was kind of like this whole aspect of choosing between what you should do and choosing between what you know, and on the other side of what you would like to do. And this card does represent choice. It does represent having lots of different options and looking at where you can find difference in the experience that you have, and also seeking for more than that. And obviously for that reason, the Gemini aspect, it's linked to Mercury.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there's also kind of that duality energy of Gemini too,
Oh yes, we're
which
coming
I
to the
think shows
tour.
up pretty nicely in there.
Yeah, right. So again, you can see that there. So on one hand, you've got a guy, on the other hand, you've got a girl. Then when you look in the background, so behind the lady, you have a snake winding up the tree, and behind the guy, you have a tree that's effectively got fire on it. So
Yeah.
this talks about the sort of two aspects of life where you can be ruled by logic or you can be ruled by your passions, where you're choosing between this and that. And we talk about, you know, ambi words that you can definitely count with Gemini energy and the Lovers: ambiguous, ambidextrous, ambivalent, you know, these kind of, definitely the duality of this, which leads me really nicely into this. So when you see, I have to try and put myself in the middle there. When you see the Lovers card, its number is actually the number 6 at the top there. and you can see this union between these two people is blessed by the Archangel Raphael. Hello. Sorry, I'm just being a dork. And then on the other side of this, you have the Devil card, right? And the Devil card is number 15. So 1 and 5 gives you 6. So now you're starting to see the numerological values of this. But if you look at the similarities there of how similar these cards are. So on the Lover's side, you have an angel blessing the union. On the other side, you have the devil ruling the union. And what that kind of talks about is where your choices, your decisions have taken you down paths that are now kind of effectively binding or holding you back, or now they've kind of run away with themselves. So one of the ways that I talk about this, and I can go into this a little bit, I have an uncle who is an addict. Sad to say for him, because I love him dearly. But what I always say is, when it comes to those sorts of things, the original choice to pick up whatever it is that you're addicted to was a decision. It was a conscious choice that you made. And eventually you come into this energy where it becomes a habit, and you feel like you're sort of chained or bound to that thing, because the choice is no longer a choice. You're slave to that thing that you have chosen, and now say, oh, I don't have a choice, I'm addicted.
Yeah. And that, if you hold those two up again, like you just were, it, like the duality aspect of it, and put your head in the middle, it's like the devil and the angel on your shoulders, like telling you, do this or do that.
I love that.
That's what I was thinking the whole time I'm seeing that. It's like, these are like on your shoulders right now. Like, do this thing. It's going to be great. It's going to feel really good. And then on the other hand, you should do this other thing. It's much better for you.
Absolutely. I love that. It's perfect. Really, really perfect. So does that tie in with Gemini energy?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Gemini energy, obviously that choice component is there, but there is a negative aspect to it. It's all about duality. Like, there's one way that you can go and there's another way that you can go. There is the route where it's more playful and more, about curiosity and exploration. And then there's the other side that Gemini kind of gets a bad rap. So I don't want to feed into that too much, but there is a manipulative part of Gemini where it's like, you can choose to do this one way, or you can use, your powers, your intellectual prowess, and your sort of social abilities and adaptations for evil to sort of get what you want, to pretend to be something that you're not even. That can be a big Gemini thing too. Like, I have a friend that was, she's a Gemini, and in elementary school, she literally would go to school and pretend to be like her twin sister. She would pretend like she had a twin, and today she's her twin sister, and she would convince everyone that she was not herself. That's not like a horrible thing to do necessarily, but they can be manipulative just to play tricks on people, or it can get a little bit more malevolent than that sometimes too, if there are certain other energies at play. So it's a whole spectrum of things with Gemini, and it just depends on where you fall on the spectrum in that moment.
Yeah, I love that. And actually, you touched on something that I really wanted to ask you, because one thing with Gemini energy is a lot of people, I totally get the communication bit, and I totally get the sort of social butterfly energy, which is very often what you can see here. It's a very light-hearted card. It really is. It's got lots of good energy behind it. And I'm going to talk about this lot a bit more in a moment. But the facts and figures, where does that come through with Gemini?
Gemini is very inquisitive. They want to know a lot of things, or a little bit about a lot of things. Like, they're very curious, and they're like a sign where they can talk about pretty much anything, to the extent where you think that they'll know what they're talking about. They're like what is that called? Like a master of none. Like they know a little bit. Yeah, jack of all trades, but master of none. Like, they know enough to get by about pretty much any topic, so that way they can just slide into any social situation and chat people up and all of that. So they're very adaptable in that way, but they usually don't dive as deep into all of that. But with facts and figures, there's always two sides to everything, right? Like, even especially in this day and age, we're living in the time of like alternative facts and fake news and this and that. There are like 20 sides to every story, and that's true. Like, people say there's two sides to every story. There's usually like at least 10, and each one has its own form of truth in it. And so Gemini can kind of pick out the little bits and pieces of truth, and then manipulate the rest to adhere to what they're trying to accomplish, essentially. So yeah, but they're like, they definitely want to gather facts. They usually like to know a lot of things about a lot of things.
And it's one thing that I only really sort of started to notice, actually, the more I learned about astrology. At first I just used to see kind of Geminis as these kind of social butterfly type people that were kind of here one minute and gone the next, and a bit like a sort of like a social tumbleweed. They come in, they're totally here while they're here, and then they're gone again. Then they just kind of disappear. So, okay, awesome. With the Lovers as well. So when you see this card in a reading, when it comes to relationships, I've seen this represent, so certainly for guys as well, depending on, what they're like, this will see them choosing between two partners, between two partners. And it will sometimes see them having that, the energy of choice behind it, where they're making a choice to align with a certain person or to be with a certain person. It shows up that way a lot. And this whole idea here of the archangel with the sun at his back, so that's kind of a representative of the power of union. So when you align with something or someone else, when you come together with other people, when you collaborate or connect with other people, those unions tend to bring you more than you had before, or they make you more than you were before.
Yeah. And so those both are very Gemini things. One of the things that I see very commonly with people with a lot of Gemini energy, especially if it's with their Venus, their seventh house, ruler of their seventh house, but really just someone with a lot of Gemini can have this. They like to keep their options open when it comes to romance. Even when they're locked in on a relationship, they want to feel like they have options. So they will flirt and flirt and flirt. They might never act on it, but they will keep those options open. So in the back of their mind, they're like, I can still get someone else if I need to, or I still have options. Even if they are so devoted and so in love, they'll still have that kind of in the back of their head, and they'll still play around a little bit. So very much, about choice. And it's not just when it's associated with their relationships, like Geminis in general. I have a lot of great Geminis in my life. They're all, wonderful people, but they have these qualities. And it's a thing for sure.
Yeah. It's funny you say that as well, because this card is very light-hearted. It's very flirty, very flirtatious. Sometimes as well, this often pops up for people that are just getting into a relationship. So it will kind of show that, like the new or the nascent sort of relationship or love that's kind of blossoming. It really is a lovely card. And obviously, like in astrology as well, it will depend what it's surrounded by. But yeah, very often it really is about that. And, when it shows up for love, it does show very often really good and strong bonds. So it's interesting that you say that, but it tends to be the kind of relationship. So like your Justice card, that's marriage, where the commitment is tight and it's binding, whereas the Lovers card is where it's new, it's fresh, it's light-hearted, it's free. It just has much more of a bright energy to it than anything else.
Yeah, that's definitely a Gemini energy too. And they can definitely be loyal, and it can be long lasting, but they need that playfulness. They need that flirtatiousness. They need to feel like they're kind of able to move about freely. It's an air energy. They want to, think about and talk to other people sometimes, but that doesn't mean that they're not invested in the relationship for sure. And then that energy of collaboration too, that's such a Gemini thing, because Gemini is about community and connection and, getting together, on a mental level to share ideas with other people. And it rules literally like your neighbors, your community members, siblings, which I think you wrote about in your PDF for this. Like siblings are a big Gemini thing.
Absolutely. Twins. This card I have seen for people, especially if it's attended with something like the Ace of Cups, or the Three of Cups as well. If you see those two cards with the Lovers card, very likely that the person either has twin children or is going to give birth to twin children. So yeah, for sure.
And that's like, if you see Gemini on the fifth house cusp, or like maybe even some Mercury there, they'll usually have multiple children, but sometimes they're more likely to have twins, especially if they have that genetic predisposition, because it usually runs in the family. So I'll ask them, like, do twins run in your family? Your firstborn might be twins, you know, like that could be a thing. And I've also seen, because there's that energy, even though Gemini is a technically a masculine sign, it's ruled by Mercury, which is hermaphroditic, so it's like not male or female. And a lot of times people who have Gemini in the 5th house, they'll choose not to learn the sex of their child. And I recently had someone who, like, on the sonogram or whatever, they couldn't figure out for sure if it was male or female, so they kind of had to wait. Like, they knew it might be in one direction, but they weren't sure. And so that kind of thing will show up with that Gemini 5th house energy. Those are, a lot of times, those are people where they'll choose not to know the sex until after the birth.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, that's so cool. I actually didn't know that. Yeah, the other thing as well with the Lovers card, you tend to see this where things are, where they're kind of flourishing in the right way, but you need more information. So that whole idea of that new relationship or that new love that's kind of coming in, this would be where you're kind of prompted to get to know that person better, or kind of get prompted to know more about them or get closer to them.
Okay, yeah, I mean, that makes sense. It's kind of that flirtatious stage, the Gemini stage, information gathering.
Yeah, for sure. And then, yeah, I mean, we talked about the opposite of this. I just find that absolutely, you know, really, and what you said about the angel and the devil on your shoulder, perfect, absolutely perfect. It really does make sense. And I think one of the things that I like about this pairing as well is it kind of shows you, so whatever choice you're making here, if the devil shows up, it means that you probably need to check the choice that you've made, or maybe go in a different direction. With the Mercury aspect as well to Gemini, do you find, it's a really random question, but I'm going to ask it, do you find that you get either really girly guys or tomboy girls? Is that like a thing?
Sometimes, you know, and it's not always the case or across the board, but a lot of times people who are Gemini, like Gemini women, will be kind of tomboys when they're younger. But I've seen a lot of tomboy, like kind of like grown-up women who are just a little bit more like masculine in the way that they approach things, like that type of thing. I've definitely seen that for sure.
Yeah.
And there can also be some sort of maybe gender confusion or confusion about sexuality that shows up more strongly with heavy Gemini presence in certain situations and certain alignments in the chart. And I've seen that as, you know, across the board being the case. Or even
maybe a
just
bit more fluid as well with that.
exactly.
Like
that's what I was about to say, like more fluid, like maybe being more open to different options with their sexuality. It's not like they want to lock themselves into like one specific thing.
Yeah, it's interesting. The reason I ask is because all of the Gemini guys that I know all have really pretty faces.
Yeah, that's definitely.
I know that sounds really weird, but like they're not so much handsome, but they're pretty.
Yeah, they have like childlike kind of features. Like they're like
delicate. Or like really feminine looking eyes and long eyelashes. I can't explain it any better than that.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely, it's a mercurial thing. So like Mercury, when it affects your appearance, it makes things like smaller, more petite, usually like a pointier chin and like, you know, big wide eyes, kind of more like childlike features, like delicate features. That's a very Gemini thing. It's a Virgo thing too, but Virgo is a little more harsh. And like it still can bring delicate features in like a smaller frame, but it's like there's a harshness to it that is not there with Gemini. Gemini is more childlike. Like Virgo can have those delicate features but still look old. Like it's not the
same. Yeah, cool. Amazing. Is there anything else you want to touch on with this?
I feel like we covered a lot of stuff.
Brilliant. As always, thank you so much. You can find Heather at astrologywithheather.com, and you can also find her on YouTube, which I absolutely suggest that you do. If you want to see the next one in this series, you're going to have to go over to her channel. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. There's going to be a link in the description box below. Listen, Heather, it's always a pleasure. I always have such a blast with you. Thank you so much for agreeing to be a part of the project and doing it with me.
Yeah, thank you for doing this with me too. It's been fun and I'm learning so many things.
Awesome. All right, well, listen, take care and we will see you soon.